For as long as anyone can remember, the property tax has been the one bill you could never truly escape. You can work your whole life. You can pay off your mortgage. But it doesn't matter. Every year, the county assessor's envelope arrives. It's a constant, lingering feeling of injustice. You are, in effect, paying rent on a home you already own. Skip that payment, and the government can take the home you built. That reality, that deep-seated frustration, has finally reached a breaking point. Across America, a quiet revolution is underway. More than a dozen states are now actively working on plans to do the unthinkable. Not just reduce property taxes, but to cut them to zero. They promise a new American dream. They say the money will come from other places, from massive budget surpluses, from oil royalties, from tourism dollars. They are promising true home ownership for the first time. But in state-level economics, there is no such thing as a free lunch. This isn't a tax abolition. It is, in fact, America's largest and most dangerous fiscal experiment, a massive tax shift. And the central question is this: are we trading the stability of property taxes, as much as we hate them, for the extreme volatility of consumption, tourism, and energy revenue? Tonight, we are analyzing the 12 states on the front line. We will examine the plan, we will analyze who is fighting back, and we will expose the true hidden cost of tax-free home ownership. Number 1. Texas, the Lone Star Gamble. In Texas, the idea of freedom runs deep. The state has no income tax, but it compensates with some of the highest property taxes in the nation. For decades, Texans accepted this as the Texas trade-off. Not anymore. The plan, championed by Governor Greg Abbott, is bold. Use a portion of the state's massive budget surplus to eventually buy down and eliminate school property taxes entirely. These taxes would, in theory, be replaced by surging sales and consumption taxes. This plan was supercharged by a staggering $32.7 billion budget surplus projected for the 2023-2024 biennium. Using that political momentum, lawmakers passed an $18 billion property tax relief package, raising the homestead exemption to $100,000. But relief is not abolition. The political conflict began immediately. Who is fighting this? The mayors of Texas's largest cities, local county judges, and school districts. They argue that relying on sales tax is dangerously unstable. School boards in particular warn that their budgets will be tied directly to the price of oil and consumer spending, and that leads to the core risk. The Texas model isn't a magic solution. It's a tax shift from a stable asset to a volatile activity. Sales taxes are regressive, meaning they hit low-income families and retirees on fixed incomes the hardest. When the next oil bust comes, and in Texas it always comes, that $33 billion surplus will vanish. If the sales tax revenue collapses, who will fund the schools? Texas is gambling its children's education on the stability of consumer spending and the price of crude oil. For homeowners, it's a dangerous bet. Number 2, Wyoming, freedom funded by the ground. In Wyoming, low taxes are a way of life. The state values independence, and it has built an economy that reflects that. Like Texas, it has no income tax. But unlike Texas, it already has very low property taxes. The plan here is to go even further, using the state's vast mineral wealth, oil, gas, and coal, to fund local services directly. The state's royalties and severance taxes pump billions into government coffers. This isn't a new idea. It's an escalation of Wyoming's entire economic model. The plan is to use this energy revenue to erase the remaining property tax burden, especially for seniors. The conflict in Wyoming isn't from the outside, it's from within. Economists have a term for this: the resource curse. Wyoming's state budget is a roller coaster, entirely dependent on global commodity prices. When energy prices are high, the state is flooded with cash. When they crash, the budget collapses. The risk is volatility. Local governments in non-energy areas, like the tourism-heavy town of Jackson, worry they will be left behind, unable to fund essential services. Furthermore, the entire model is based on a finite resource. As the world transitions to green energy, What happens when the coal and gas revenue dries up for good? Wyoming's freedom is funded by the ground, but the ground is running out. It's a model with a built-in expiration date. Number 3, Florida. The tourist trap. Florida has always sold a dream: sunshine and no state income tax. This has made it America's retirement capital. But that dream meets a harsh reality: rising home values and soaring property tax bills that punish retirees on fixed incomes. The plan in Florida is more targeted. It's not a statewide abolition. Instead, it's a powerful county-level system of exemptions for seniors, like the Hag Golden Years exemption. This allows counties to freeze, or in some cases, eliminate property taxes for residents over 65 who meet certain income and residency requirements. How can they afford it? Through tourism. Florida funds these exemptions with its Tourist Development Tax, or TDT. In simple terms, the 140 million tourists who visit each year pay the taxes so the retirees don't have to. The conflict here is generational. Young families and working-class residents do not qualify for these exemptions. They are left to carry the burden, creating a deep divide between protected retirees and the struggling workforce that serves them. The risk is obvious: total dependence on tourism. We saw this model collapse in 2020. When the pandemic hit, tourism vanished overnight, and so did the revenue. A single severe hurricane season or another global shutdown could instantly wipe out the funding for local services. Florida's model isn't a solution. It's a subsidy for one group, paid for by another, and built on the most volatile industry on earth. Number 4. North Dakota. The legacy fund gamble. In North Dakota, a citizen-led revolution was brewing. The plan was one of the boldest in the nation. North Dakota, thanks to its Bakken oil boom, has a sovereign wealth account called the Legacy Fund. As of 2025, that fund is worth over $10 billion. A ballot initiative, known as Measure 2, was proposed to use the interest from the Legacy Fund, hundreds of millions per year, to completely replace the $1.4 billion in property taxes collected statewide. It was a simple, powerful idea. Let the state's oil wealth pay the bills forever. But the plan hit a wall. The conflict was between the citizens and the lawmakers. The Abolish Property Tax group failed to gather enough signatures to get the measure on the 2024 ballot. Why? Because lawmakers from both parties, along with powerful state interests, opposed it. They want to control that $10 billion fund themselves, using it for large-scale infrastructure projects, not giving it back to homeowners. The fact check is, this revolution has stalled, but the underlying risk of the idea remains. The plan depends on the stock market. The Legacy Fund's earnings are tied to its investments. If the market crashes, as it did in 2022, the fund can lose money, generating no interest to pay the bills. The citizens of North Dakota were asked to gamble their local schools and fire departments on the performance of the S&P 500. For now, the gamble is off, but the movement is not dead. Number 5. Tennessee. The quiet reimbursement. While other states are fighting political wars, Tennessee has taken a quieter, more pragmatic path. The state has no income tax and a booming economy. This strong fiscal position has allowed them to implement a highly successful property tax relief program. This is not abolition. It is a targeted reimbursement program. If you are 65 or older, a disabled homeowner, or a veteran under a certain income limit, the state of Tennessee sends you a check to cover some or all of your property taxes. You pay your bill, and the state pays you back. It is simple, effective, and directly helps the most vulnerable. The conflict, however, is one of fairness. The program is a cliff. Retirees whose fixed income is just $1 above the income limit get no help at all. This creates resentment among seniors who feel they are too rich to get help, but too poor to afford the tax hikes. The risk is administrative. This is not a permanent guarantee. It is a line item in the state budget. Retirees must apply for it every single year. They live in constant fear that in the next legislative session, a new governor or a new budget crisis will cause lawmakers to quietly cut the program, leaving them exposed. It is relief, not freedom. It is a support payment, not true ownership. Number 6. South Dakota, the no-tax contender. South Dakota loves to compete with its northern neighbor. It has no income tax, no corporate tax, and is famously business-friendly. Now it's setting its sights on property taxes. The plan here is in its early stages. It's not abolition yet, but a gradual phasing out by redirecting state budget surpluses and tourism revenue to local governments. South Dakota is running budget surpluses, and its economy, driven by agriculture and a massive banking sector in Sioux Falls, is stable. The conflict is with the business community. This is the no free lunch principle in action. If you cut property taxes, the money must come from somewhere. Businesses are terrified that lawmakers will be forced to raise business taxes to make up the difference. They warn this would kill the South Dakota miracle and chase high-paying financial jobs to other states. The risk is one of scale. South Dakota has a tiny population of less than 1 million people. Its economy is small. Does the revenue from Mount Rushmore and agriculture really provide a stable enough base to fund every school, every road, and every police officer in the state forever? It's a bold claim for a small state, and one that remains unproven. Number 7. Alaska. The dividend or the services? If any state understands resource wealth, it's Alaska. The state's $75 billion permanent fund is legendary. For decades, it has paid residents a yearly check, the Permanent Fund Dividend, PFD, just for living there. The plan being debated in Juneau is radical. Redirect a portion of the fund's earnings, which are currently used for those dividend checks, to fund local governments instead. This would effectively replace property taxes. The conflict here is the most intense in the nation. It's not politicians versus the people. It is the people versus themselves. Alaskans view that PFD check as their money. It is a sacred cow. Asking them to give up their annual check, which can be over $1,000 per person, to pay for local services is a political non-starter for many. It's a direct battle. Do you want a check in your pocket, or do you want your local roads plowed? The risk is sustainability. The entire model is based on oil, and Alaska's oil production has been in a steep decline for decades. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline is running at a fraction of its capacity. The permanent fund is being drained faster than it's being refilled. Alaska is fighting over how to divide a shrinking pie. Using the fund to pay for property taxes doesn't solve the underlying problem. It just accelerates the date the fund runs out of money completely. Number 8. Nevada. The casino gamble. Nevada built its fortune on a gamble, and it's doing it again. With no income tax, the state relies on its massive tourism and gaming industry. The plan, concentrated in Clark County, Las Vegas, is to use hotel occupancy taxes and gaming revenue to offset the property tax burden for full-time residents. In short, let the tourists pay for the local services. It's a seductive idea. The conflict comes from the casino industry itself. They argue that they are already taxed heavily and that any new tourism tax will make Las Vegas less competitive with other destinations. The other conflict is geographic. What about rural Nevada? The counties that don't have billion-dollar casinos on a glittering strip. This plan risks creating a state of haves and have-nots, where Las Vegas residents are subsidized while rural homeowners are left behind. The risk is 100% dependency on discretionary spending. When a recession hits, the first things people cut are vacations, conventions, and gambling. We saw in 2008 and 2020 that Nevada's economy isn't just volatile, it's fragile. It is the first to collapse and the last to recover. Basing your entire state's funding on people's fun money is the definition of a high-risk fiscal experiment. Number 9. Kansas, the heartland relief. For years, Kansas was known for frustrated homeowners and rising assessments. Now it's quietly implementing reform. The plan is nearly identical to Tennessee's. It is not abolition. It is a targeted refund program for seniors 65 and older who fall below a certain income threshold. If you've spent your life paying into the system, the state argues, you shouldn't be taxed out of your home in retirement. The conflict, just like in Tennessee, is the cliff. It creates a sharp line in the sand, dividing retirees into two classes, those who get the check and those who do not. The risk is the economy. Kansas's economy is heavily dependent on agriculture and aviation manufacturing. Both of these industries are notoriously cyclical. A bad drought or a downturn in aircraft orders can turn the state's budget surplus into a deficit almost overnight. That refund check that seniors depend on, it's based on tax revenue from industries that are, themselves, dependent on the weather and global travel. That is not stability, it is a fragile promise. Number 10. Utah, the Silicon Slopes model. Utah has become one of America's biggest economic success stories. The state is booming thanks to a massive influx of residents and a thriving tech industry known as the Silicon Slopes. This has created huge budget surpluses. The plan in Utah is to use this surplus from tech and sales tax growth to phase out taxes. But here's the fact check. The primary focus in Utah has been on cutting the state income tax. Property tax relief, particularly freezing bills for seniors, is part of the discussion, but it's not the main goal. The conflict is about growth itself. Activists and local leaders are warning that the state's explosive growth is straining infrastructure. They are running out of water. Their roads are clogged. They argue this is the worst possible time to cut property taxes, which are the primary tool used to pay for new roads, water treatment, and schools. The risk is the tech bubble. Utah has built a new economy based on the tech industry. We have all seen this movie before. When the dot-com bubble burst in 2000, or when tech stocks crashed in 2022, those high-paying jobs vanished. If the Silicon Slopes boom turns into a bust, Utah's entire funding model will collapse along with it. The truth about the trade-off. As we've analyzed these 12 states, a clear pattern emerges. Not a single state is truly abolishing taxes. They are merely shifting the burden from one place to another. They are all running away from the property tax, a tax that is stable, predictable, and historically difficult to avoid. And they are all running toward three highly volatile models. The energy model, like Wyoming, North Dakota, and Alaska, which is dependent on global commodity prices. The tourism and consumption model, like Florida, Nevada, and Texas, which is the first thing to collapse in a recession. And the targeted relief model, like Tennessee and Kansas, which is not a permanent solution, but a government program that can be cut at the next budget crisis. Here is the fundamental trade-off that no politician wants to admit. The price of cutting property taxes is stability. Property taxes, for all their flaws, are what pay for the things we cannot live without. They pay for the police officer who shows up at your door. They pay for the firefighter who saves your home. And they pay for the schools that educate your grandchildren. Sales taxes, oil royalties, and hotel taxes are unreliable. They vanish in a crisis. The real fight, then, is not just at the state level. It's happening in your local community. If you want to understand how your local county is funded and what services are first on the chopping block, watch our next video. The truth about your county's budget, what they don't want you to know. This brings us to the final question. I want to hear from you, especially if you live in one of these states. Do you trust these plans? Or do you fear that the money for schools and local services will disappear when the next crisis hits? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. This is not a simple fight for no taxes. This is a complex battle to define what our communities will look like and how they will survive for the next 30 years.